It is time to get started with MATLAB. This tutorial is for someone who has never opened MATLAB and does not know what it is. So first of all, let's look at what it stands for. MATLAB stands for Matrix Laboratory. A matrix is something in math that you will see further on, but it holds a lot of number and is very powerful. To keep it very simple, MATLAB is a calculator. Pause yourself and think about what you've done with your calculator in the past. Most of the time, you did one instruction at a time. Instructions must conform to a specific vocabulary and syntax. By vocabulary, we mean that there's certain keywords that must be spelled correctly. By syntax, imagine grammar. Every word in a sentence has to be placed specifically for it to make sense. Well, in math, every symbol, every keyword, every parenthesis has to be placed in the same way. For example, a syntax error such as this one would result in an error. In any calculator, two plus signs immediately next to each other is what we call a syntax error. Now, same as your calculator, you've been used to using a lot of buttons. MATLAB, of course, does not have buttons, but it has a lot of keywords that give you the capacity to process data. In your calculator, and usually scientific calculator, you might have used graphing capabilities. MATLAB is very powerful when it comes to graphing too. Now, something that your calculator did not do is a possibility to create your own software with graphical user interface. Drop-down menu, buttons, fields to enter. This is not something a basic calculator would allow us to do. However, MATLAB gives us that capability. So as you can see, MATLAB is a very, very powerful calculator. To start MATLAB in any computer lab on campus, check the desktop first for an icon. If it exists, simply double-click. If there is no icon, you may have to search in the search button. However, if you are in the dorm or off campus with your personal computer, there are two options. The first one is to buy MATLAB and install it. The second one is to log into ERNI, make sure that Citrix is installed, and under ERAU Tools you will see the MATLAB icon. If you don't see it, make sure you click the personalized link and make it accessible. Now, Citrix has a lot of problems, and they are well known from every student. It's very, very, very slow. It disconnects very easily for no reason, and if you leave the screen unattended, it freezes. These are known issues. If you start using Citrix with the mentality that one of these will happen, your stress level can be managed. If for some reason you're trying to do homework at the last minute and it happens, just ignore your laptop, walk to the lab peacefully, and finish your work there. Citrix wasn't working has never been a valid excuse and will never ever be a valid excuse for not doing your work on time. These issues are well known ahead of time and can be managed. Whatever you do, do not use Citrix in the lab for the reason just mentioned, but in the lab you have a version that's your own. So make sure you simply go on the desktop and double-click the icon. So let's go ahead and open MATLAB and discover how it looks. If you're in the lab, go ahead and click on the icon with me. Pause the video. If you're on a personal computer, go ahead and open it through Citrix, but you know it will be slow. Embry-Riddle is currently in the process of switching from 2012 to 2013. Let me show you both versions. You'll see it looks very identical. Here is 2012. You have 4 primary panels: the current folder, the command window, the workspace, and the command history. Now let me show you 2013 and we'll continue on 2013. Here's the current folder. This is where we actually see where we are. All the files that we are about to create will eventually be saved in a folder. In the middle we have the command window. On the right we have the workspace, and at the bottom we have the command history. The layout is identical to 2012. only the buttons at the top are different. So this is the default layout. When you open up MATLAB, all these windows show up. The cursor blinks on the command window in the center, and it's next to what we call the prompt symbols, the greater than symbols. This just means that MATLAB is prompting you for an instruction. It's asking you to enter something, an equation, a command, anything that you want. If for some reason we don't see those symbols, MATLAB is busy. It could be loading, it could be stuck, it could be frozen, but if we don't have those symbols, we cannot type a command. After that, let's see how closely it is to a calculator. The simplest thing you've ever done in a calculator is do equation. For example, 2 plus 4 is 6. Now when you type this in your calculator, what happens? Which operation happens first? The plus or the multiplication? The multiplication. The order of operation is absolutely respected in MATLAB. If you want to bypass that, and if you want the addition to happen first, you will have to go back and put parentheses. Notice the keyword that keeps showing up, ANS. Same as a calculator, this stores your latest result. The one addition that we do not see on our calculator is the workspace. This is a view into the memory. What values are stored behind the scene? As you can see, ANS is there only once, not 3 times. It only stored the latest answer, which was my 40. Let's go back to the command window. If you wanted to clear the screen on a calculator, you hit clear. In MATLAB, you have to type CLC. It clears the command window. Alright, the next thing on a calculator that we've all learned to use are the buttons, sine, cosine, tangent, exponential, and so on. As you can see, we have no buttons on our screen. But the documentation of the elementary math function, so doclfun, brings up an entire list of all the buttons, in quote, that we have. We have trigonometric, we have exponential, complex, and rounding and remainder functions. Now if we look at the very top, trigonometric has sine and cosine, but it has multiple sine. The first one is sine alone, the second one is sine of an argument in degrees. What does that mean? Well, let's go try it. The command window is also called the experimental window, because if we don't know something, we just play with it. So let's do sine of 30 degrees. That's well known to be 1/2. So how come MATLAB has negative 0.9? Well, 30 is 30. For MATLAB, that's 30 radian, not degrees. Our option number 1 is to put a D in there. Sine D of 30. We're telling MATLAB that the 30 is not radian, but degrees. So there we get our 0.5 back. However, if we didn't know that function existed, there's another option that we have. How would you convert 30 degrees to radians, since MATLAB needs radians? 30 degrees times pi over 180 would convert it to radians. And in that case, we get half. This also shows you that pi is a keyword. We don't type 3.14159. It wouldn't be as precise. So always type pi instead of its value. It is a known keyword. Now let's go look at how we solve equations. For example, we are to solve for the hypotenuse of this triangle. The sides are 7 and 6, and we're looking for x. The equation is rather simple, but how can MATLAB handle this? Let's see if it can solve directly the equation. No. Identically to a calculator, we always need to solve the equation first on paper, make all the known values on the right side of an equation, and then we can plug it in the calculator. identical in MATLAB, we must have all the known values on the right side. So if we do want to solve it, x equals square root of 7 squared plus 6 squared. And in that case, we actually end up with the result. Another thing that's different in MATLAB. If you want to multiply, this used to be possible in a calculator, but it's no longer possible in MATLAB. Notice how the error messages show up. The little tick mark underneath shows you where the error is expected. MATLAB didn't like the equal sign in the first. MATLAB didn't like the parenthesis in the second. It tends to show you what you have to fix. So in this case, always use the multiplication symbol and not parentheses. Now look at the workspace again. Notice how now we have two answers. How come x is new? Well, when we solved our equation, we didn't tell MATLAB to use the default location ANS. We actually wanted the result to be stored in a variable called x. So MATLAB stored it in a variable called x, and the next equation that I did, 2 times 6 equals 12, got stored in a different answer. This is normal. We can create as many results as we want. This is basically it as far as using the command window. Calculator, besides multiplication, it's identical. Now, here is a little trick. What if this wasn't supposed to be a 6 but a 3? How can you go back and change something instead of retyping the equation? Can you just select and type a 3? No. MATLAB is ready for us down here, but not up there. So how do we change it? Well, we have to rewrite the equation. But there are little tricks. You've got the up and down arrow keys that are made to go back through your history. If you look at my history, from the bottom to the top, I did 2 times 6, 2 parentheses 6, and x equals square root. Since I'm trying to access this one, it is 3 up. So when I am in the prompt symbol, I can press the up arrow key 3 times, and it goes through my history. Then I can easily edit, and I don't even have to put the cursor at the end to actually hit enter. Those are tricks that you will acquire through using MATLAB. The up and down arrow keys usually help us not retype long equations. Go ahead and test your own understanding. Solve for the radius of this circle. The area is known, the equation is known, pi, remember, is pi, do not type 3.14, but go ahead and pause the video and try it. Try to solve for r. When you're done, make a quick change using the up and down arrow keys to change the area to 138.99. Let's go through the key points. The various windows of MATLAB introduced here are the command window, which was the most important, the history, and the workspace. Using the command window, write equations. Respect the order of operation. That's the basic idea behind any calculator. Use the multiplication to multiply and not parentheses alone. The command window to show all the functions, so all the buttons that we used to have, is doc for the documentation, lfun for elementary function. The default unit for angles is radians, and the keyword pi is absolutely known. Use the up and down arrow keys to call back what you've already done. And ANS is the default variable name that MATLAB uses to store the latest result. As far as solving equation, we have to solve them first on paper before we can code them. All known values need to be on the right hand side of the equal sign. And the one name that's on the left side is the one unknown you're trying to solve for. Now caution, none of these windows are used to write code. As soon as we exit, we have lost all our work. So how does it work? How can we code? That's the next tutorial.